Praise the Lord and Jai Dishu. Due to some technical problems, we experienced a delay in beginning the virtual Mass. We are extremely sorry. We welcome you all to the virtual Easter Vigil Mass. This Mass was celebrated in St. Mary's, Greensboro Catholic Church, Australia. This Mass was celebrated by Father Stephen Rigo, and the choir will be led now by Ace Choir. Before we begin, it's a kind request to everyone participating in this virtual Mass to put your phones in silent mode. Thank you. Let's make sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Today, let us pray for the faithful all over the world who will be celebrating Easter. But due to the pandemic of COVID-19, it won't be like the usual celebration. At this time, let our faith increase and may we celebrate Him united in spirit. As God is spirit, let us worship Him in spirit and truth. Let us also pray for all the countries affected by COVID-19 and all those contracted with this disease. On the day of Easter, may our risen Lord heal all those suffering and end the suffering in all the countries. May our risen Lord also enlighten us that we may stay safe. In accord with ancient tradition, this night is one of vigil for the Lord. Saint Augustine called it the mother of all vigils. The Gospel of Saint Luke reminds the faithful to have their lamps burning ready, awaiting their master's return, so that when he arrives, he will find them wide awake and will seat them at his table. It is the greatest and most noble of all solemnities, and it is to be unique in every single church. On this holy night, the church keeps watch, celebrating the resurrection of Christ in the sacraments and awaiting His return in glory. It is the turning point of the Triduum, the Passover of the New Covenant, which marks Christ's passage from death to life. The Easter Vigil liturgy has 4 parts: the service of light, the liturgy of the Word, the liturgy of baptism, and the liturgy of the Eucharist. We'll begin with part 1, the service of light. In a suitable place outside the church, a blazing fire is prepared so that the people may gather around it and experience the flames, dispelling the darkness and lighting up the night. The celebrant, having reached the fire, along with the faithful, sign themselves with the sign of the cross. Then the Paschal candle is brought forward. It conveys the truth that Christ is the light of the world, and the light scatters the darkness of our hearts and minds. The celebrant cuts a cross into the candle with a stylus. Then he makes the Greek letter Alpha above the cross, the letter Omega below, and 4 numerals of the current year between the arms of the cross. Then the priest lights the candle from the new fire. All hold unlit candles. Just as the children of Israel were guided at night by the pillar of fire, so Christians follow the risen Christ. A proclamation is being sung while proceeding to the altar. In the first place, the priest lights his candle. Secondly, all the faithful light the candles, and then the candle is placed on the altar. Since we are in a virtual Holy Mass, we will light our own Paschal candles, believing and remembering our last Easter Vigil. After this, the deacon or the priest that announces the Easter proclamation.
Good evening and welcome everyone. Again, there's no formal liturgical welcome or greeting because it's a continuation of the Easter Triduum that we began on Holy Thursday. Today, the Easter Vigil is the completion of our Easter Triduum. It recognises the resurrection of Christ, the completion of God's work in Christ to bring life out of death. So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
My dear brothers and sisters, on this most sacred night, in which our Lord Jesus Christ passed over from death to life, the Church calls upon her daughters and sons scattered throughout the world to come together to watch and pray. If we keep the memorial of the Lord's Paschal solemnity in this way, listening to his word and celebrating his mysteries, then we shall have the sure hope of sharing his triumph over death and living with him in God. So the first part of our celebration today is the lighting of the Paschal candle, the candle that is used whenever we baptise children. It is used whenever we farewell someone from this life through a funeral, and it's used as a reminder to us that Christ is our light. Christ our light,
Thanks be to God.
Christ our light,
Thanks be to God.
Christ our light,
Thanks be to God.
May the light of Christ, rising in glory, dispel the darkness of our hearts and minds, and especially at this time.
Christ be our light, shining above, shine through the darkness. Christ be our light, shine in your church, gathered today. This is the night of new beginnings.
It's along the liturgy of the Word tonight because we remember and represent the way that God has worked throughout history to choose a people as his own, to be understood as a loving God, to work in human history, and to have as its culmination the passion, death and resurrection of Christ. My dear brothers and sisters, now that we've begun our solemn vigil, let us listen with quiet hearts to the Word of God. Let us meditate on how God in times past saved his people, and in these, the last days, he has sent his Son as our Redeemer. Let us pray that our God may complete this paschal work of salvation by the fullness of salvation.
Now we have moved to the second part of today's celebration, Liturgy of the Word. Now we can set aside our candles and sit for the readings. One of the unique aspects of the Easter Vigil is the recounting of the outstanding deeds of the history of salvation. These deeds are related in 7 readings from the Old Testament, chosen from the Law and the Prophets, and 2 readings from the New Testament, namely from the Apostles and from the Gospel. Thus, the Lord, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, meets us once on our journey and opening our minds and hearts, prepares us to share in the breaking of the bread and drinking of the cup. The faithful is asked to meditate upon the readings. Today, we will be having 3 readings from the Old Testament and 2 readings from the New Testament. The first reading of today is taken from the book of Genesis. This reading describes the Lord's creation on all the 6 days. On seeing his creation, God felt very good. On the 7th day, he rested from all the work undertaken.
First reading. A reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 1 and 26 to 31a. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
जग पर जाकर प्रभु का आत्मा, पृथ्वी सारी नई बना दो, हर्ष मनाए जग पर जाकर प्रभु का आत्मा पृथ्वी सारी नई बनाता हर्ष मनाए। हम प्रभु की राह देखते रहते हैं, वही हमारा सहायक और रक्षक है। हे प्रभु, तुझ पर हमारा भरोसा है, तेरा प्रेम हम पर बना रहे। जग पर जाकर प्रभु का आत्मा पृथ्वी सारी नई बनाता हर्ष मनाए। जग पर जाकर प्रभु का आत्मा पृथ्वी सारी नई बनाता हर्ष मनाए।
Now we'll have a prayer. Since we do not have a priest amidst us, one of our brother, Mr. Anand, he is going to lead the prayer.
Let us pray. O God, who wonderfully created human nature and still more wonderfully redeemed it, grant us, we pray, to set our minds against the enticements of sin, that we may merit to attain eternal joys to Christ the Lord.
Amen. Today's second reading is taken from the book of Genesis, chapter 22. This reading describes how Lord tests the faithfulness of Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his only son Isaac. On seeing Abraham's faithfulness, our Lord sends an angel who guides Abraham to offer a lamb instead. The Lord also blesses Abraham with the promise to multiply his descendants.
Second reading, a reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verses 1 and 2, 9a, 10 to 13, and 15 to 18. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies. and by your offspring shall all the nations of the earth gain blessing for themselves, because you have obeyed my voice. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
let us pray. O God, Supreme Father of the faithful, who increase the children of your promise by pouring out the grace of adoption throughout the whole world, and who, through the paschal mystery, make your servant Abraham father of nations. As once you swore, grant, we pray, that your people may enter worthily into grace to which you call them, through Christ our Lord.
Amen. The third reading is taken from the book of Exodus. It narrates how the Lord led Israelites under the leadership of Moses to cross the Red Sea. The Egyptians too follow them, but when Israelites have finished crossing the sea, by the command of Moses, the walls of water fall back to form sea, and all the Egyptians drown.
Third reading. A reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verses 15 to chapter 15, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go on dry ground through the sea. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they shall go in after them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen." Then the angel of the Lord, who went before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and the night passed without one coming near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and of cloud looked down upon the host of Egyptians, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the sea, and the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen." So Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its wonted flow when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled into it. And the Lord routed the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not much as one of them remained, but the people of Israel walked on the dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which the Lord did against the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। मैं प्रभु का गुणगान करता हूँ, उसने अपनी महिमा प्रकट की है। उसने घोड़े के साथ घुड़सवार को समुद्र में फेंक दिया है। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। प्रभु मेरा शक्तिशाली रक्षक है, उसने मुझे छुड़ा लिया है। मैं अपने ईश्वर की महिमा गाता हूँ, अपने पिता ईश्वर की गुणगान करता हूँ। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। तू अपनी प्रजा को ले जाकर अपने पर्वत पर बसाएगा, उस स्थान पर जिसे तूने अपने निवास के लिए चुना है। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए। गाए महिमा दिल से प्रभु की रक्षा करती वह भक्तों की हर्ष मनाए।
Let us pray. O God, whose ancient wonders remain undimmed in splendor even in our day, for what you once bestowed on a single people, freeing them from Pharaoh's persecution by the power of your right hand, Now, you bring about as a salvation of the nations through the waters of rebirth. Grant, we pray, that the whole world may become children of Abraham and inherit the dignity of Israel's birthright to Christ our Lord.
Amen. After the last reading from the Old Testament with its psalm and prayer, we sing Glory to God in the highest. So let us rise to sing the glory. Let's all be seated. The first reading from the New Testament is taken from the letter of Saint Paul to the Romans. Saint Paul says that we have been baptized into Jesus Christ, and hence when Jesus died, our old self also died. And when he resurrects, we shall also live with him.
O God of unchanging power and eternal light, look with favour on the wondrous mystery of the whole Church and serenely accomplish the work of human salvation, which you planned from all eternity. May the whole world know and see what was cast down is now raised up, what has become old is made new, and all things are restored to integrity through Christ, just as by him they came into being, who lives and reigns forever and ever.
Amen.
As we progress from listening to readings from the Old Testament and move to readings from the New Testament, let us give God praise and thanks.
Fourth reading. A reading from the letter of Saint Paul to the Romans, chapter 6, verses 3 to 11. Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into death? We were buried therefore with him by baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our old self was crucified with him, so that the sinful body might be destroyed, and we might no longer be enslaved to sin. For he who has died is freed from sin. But if we have died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him. For we know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him. The death he died to sin, once for all. But the life he lives to God. So you also must consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Let's rise for the acclamation. Jesus Christ, you are my life. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus Christ, you are my life. You are my life. Hallelujah. Tu sei mia, sei verità. Tu sei la nostra vita. Camminando insieme a te, vivremo in te per sempre. Jesus Christ, you are my life. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus Christ, you are my life. You are my life. Hallelujah. El gozo caminaremos trayendo tu evangelio, testimonios de caridad, hijos de Dios del mundo. Jesus Christ, you are my life. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Jesus Christ, you are my life. You are my life. Hallelujah. In today's Gospel from Saint Matthew, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary witness an angel near the tomb of Jesus who says to them that Jesus has risen and they must share this with the disciples. They leave the place with fear and joy, and on their way back, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary meet Jesus.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you,
After the Sabbath, at the first day of the week was beginning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid. I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. And then go quickly and tell his disciples. Tell them he has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them there and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers and sisters to go to Galilee. There they will see me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Do you believe in the resurrection? Do you believe in eternal life? Do you think that Christ's resurrection has made any difference to our world, or is it just for us, for our faith as Christians? The resurrection is the foundation of Christian faith and follows logically from what we celebrate at Christmas. The infinite God becomes human, takes on everything that belongs to being human, including death. And then he transforms humanity by his being raised to a new life. Not resuscitated into the same old life, but transformed into a new glorified way of living that is now ours. If there is no resurrection of Jesus, then Christianity is just another ancient religion with its own particular form of spirituality and morality. All the Christian values hinge on the resurrection. But about all of us, all of creation. On raising him from the dead, God identified himself with Jesus while delegitimizing those who had condemned and killed him. So by raising Jesus from death, God affirmed his life and his message, his project of inaugurating the kingdom of God, and his entire behaviour in life. What Jesus proclaimed about the compassion and the forgiveness of the Father is true. God is what Jesus revealed in his parables and in his life. Jesus' prophetic way of life is consistent with what the Father's desire is for us. The solidarity of Jesus with those who suffer, his defence of the poor, his forgiveness of people, his inclusion of the rejected. This is what the Father wants for all of us. Jesus is right when he seeks a more dignified and joy-filled life for all, beginning with the least. This is the greatest desire God has at heart for all of us. You see, in the resurrection, it wasn't just Jesus who was raised. His life and message was vindicated. Evil is powerful and widespread in a wide variety of forms that impacts on everyone, especially and always on the vulnerable. but only till death. Throughout the ages, Christendom and the Christian churches can and should be held accountable for the ways that they have not been faithful to the life and the message of Jesus. But it is because of him, and as a result of the resurrection, that we can be outraged, not just as Christians, but as all human beings, by any societal actions that rob the dignity of humans and all creation. But consistent with his life and message, and enlivened by the power of the resurrection, we have a responsibility to strive to be compassionate and caring for all life. The Jewish authorities and the strength of the Roman forces killed Jesus, but they didn't annihilate him because God's love for his creation wins, for all creation. In our Western theology, Western Christian theology, which tends to be more individualistic, we have focused too much just on the resurrection of Jesus. But Eastern Christianity takes its ramifications even further. In our creed, we declared that after Jesus was raised, he descended into hell. The current language is unfortunate because we think of hell as the place of damnation by God's judgment of us. But our belief is really about Christ descending even further than human life, into human death, and that he raised up all who had died. Eastern Christianity makes much of this, and as such declares that Christ broke into the place of death and destroyed its power, that he raised all humanity out of the power of death and then uplifted humanity to a place of dignity. Eastern Christianity projects a hopeful message that is not just about Jesus, but about society, about humanity, and indeed all of history. It means that we don't have to resign ourselves to just accepting everything that is wrong, unjust, and oppressive is the end of the story of individuals or societies. If we don't believe that every proverbial crucifixion ever since Jesus, war, poverty, torture, hunger, pandemics, can somehow be redeemed by God's power, who of us would not be angry or cynical and feel hopeless? We should have a wider and a cosmic vision of Jesus' resurrection. Because Easter is not just the final chapter of Jesus' life, but the final chapter of history. Death does not have the last word. The resurrection of Jesus is for us the ultimate reason for our hope, inspiring us to work for a more humane world according to the heart of God, and empowering us to wait with confidence for his promise of life to be fulfilled. In the resurrected Christ, in whom is our hope, we find the profound will of God confirmed forever. Fullness of life for the whole of creation. A life freed forever from evil and from death. The kingdom of God come true. We're still on the way. Everything is mixed and confused. Justice and injustice. Death and life. Light and darkness. Sickness and health. Everything is unfinished and incomplete, but it is in process. But the unseen power of the risen Christ is drawing us to a more definitive life. In these days in which crisis seems to extend to all the areas of human existence, as followers of Christ, as church, we need to remember that we have the responsibility of hope. That's our primary task. God is in our tears and our sorrows, in our failures and helplessness, in our depression and loneliness, in our sadness and sins, as the God who sustains us with power, who understands us and is patient with us, who always forgives and welcomes us, who is even in our death as the breath of eternal life that triumphs when everything seems lost. We can begin to live eternal life now, not by grasping onto life, but by spending it for others, and living out values that are life-giving, loving, compassionate, and eternal. So returning to the question I asked at the beginning, do you believe in the resurrection and eternal life? Is it just for us as Christians? If you do believe in it, how does that belief practically affect the way that you live your life on a daily basis? At this time in the Easter Triduum, we particularly remember our own baptismal commitment. We were intending to baptise some parishioners who have been preparing for this significant event in their journey of faith, and others who were to come to full communion in the church. This has had to be postponed, but we pray for Chris and Robin and all of those who are preparing for reception into the church through the sacraments of initiation. So this evening, on their behalf and on behalf of all of us who have been baptised, we're invited to renew our own baptismal commitments and promises. So I ask you, do you reject Satan?
I do.
And all his works?
I do.
And all his empty promises?
I do.
Do you believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth?
I do.
Do you believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was born of the Virgin Mary, who was crucified, died, and was buried, rose from the dead, and is now seated at the right hand of the Father?
I do.
Do you believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting?
I do.
This is our faith. This is the faith of the Church, and we are proud to profess it in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Amen.
Your response will be Jangu Yeshu Mukama. Your response
Jangu Yeshu Mukama.
For the Pope, the bishops, the clergy, and the religious, that as leaders in the Church, they may encourage the faithful to persevere in their faith. We pray.
Jangu Yeshu Mukama.
For Christians all over the world, that the celebration of the resurrection of the Lord may challenge them to recommit themselves to the faith they have received at baptism and live it with joy. We pray your response.
Jangu Yeshu Mukama.
For all the faithful who have gone through the season of Lent with self-denial and interior purification, that the risen Lord may shower upon them his choicest blessings, we pray your response.
Jangu Yeshu Mukama.
For peace in the world, that Jesus, who is the Prince of Peace, may enlighten the hearts and minds of world leaders, that in a spirit of dialogue and collaboration they may work towards establishing peace in the world. We pray your response.
For all of us present in this Eucharistic assembly, that the celebration of Easter may help us to live our Christian faith with fervor and courage. We pray your response.
Let us especially pray for the countries severely stricken by the pandemic COVID-19, that the country leaders may take the necessary actions to protect the lives and cure the deceased. Also, we pray for those suffering from this disease, that they may have hope, and may our risen Lord put an end to this pandemic. We also pray to our risen Lord that He may help us to be careful and stay safe during this pandemic. Your response?
For our strength and our courage, hear these prayers we offer with gratitude for the promise and the hope of new life. And we make our prayers through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
We now proceed to the liturgy of the Eucharist.
The liturgy of the Eucharist begins with the offertory. After Maundy Thursday, today we follow this liturgy of Eucharist. Let us surrender our old self, which we try to change throughout this Lenten season, so that our Lord resurrects, and may we too resurrect with Him. Let us offer ourselves and family with this Odia hymn.
Rudam
request that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God the Almighty Father.
May the Lord accept the sacrifice
at your hands for the praise and glory of his name, for our good and good of all his holy church.
Accept, we pray, O Lord, the prayers of your people with the sacrificial offerings, that what has begun in the paschal mysteries may, by the working of your power, bring us to the healing of eternity, through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right and just.
It is truly right and just, our duty and our salvation at all times to acclaim you, O Lord, but on this night, above all, to praise you yet more gloriously, when Christ our Passover has been sacrificed. For he is the true Lamb who has taken away the sins of the world. By dying, he has destroyed our death, and by rising, restored our life. Therefore, overcome with paschal joy, every land, every people exalts in your praise. And even the heavenly powers with the angelic hosts sing together the unending hymn of your glory as they acclaim. You are indeed holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts, we pray, by sending down your Spirit upon them like the dewfall, so that they may become for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time he was betrayed and entered willingly into his passion, Jesus took bread and, giving you thanks, broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you."
My Lord, my God.
In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice and, once more giving thanks, gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it. For this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant. It will be shed for you and for all for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me."
My Lord, my God.
The mystery of faith. Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation, giving thanks that you have held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that, partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity, together with Francis our Pope, Peter our Bishop, and all who minister to your people. Remember also our brothers and sisters, and especially those who have died as a result of coronavirus, and who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray, that with the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, Joseph her spouse, the apostles and martyrs, and all the saints who have pleased you throughout the ages, we may merit to be co-heirs to eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, Jesus Christ. Through him, with him, and in him, O God, Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honour is yours, forever and ever. At the Saviour's command and formed by divine teaching, we dare to pray. Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Saviour, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, "Peace I leave you, my own peace I give you," look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant us peace and unity in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever.
Amen.
The peace of the Lord be with you always.
And with your spirit.
Let us in some form offer one another, those we are with, the sign of Christ's peace.
Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. Have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. Have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. Grant us peace.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those who are called to the supper of the Lamb.
Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter my roof, but say a word, and my soul shall be healed.
May the body and blood of Christ bring us to fullness of life.
Amen.
One of the saddest aspects of celebrating the Eucharist in this way, through this online method, is that we can't be physically together. But one of the important aspects of our Christian faith is an understanding of spiritual communion. It's the desire that we be united with one another in Christ. You can have that desire, you can have that spiritual communion now, as only us, as only we are able to physically receive communion at this time.
Since we cannot receive the Holy Communion, let us remember the day when we were best prepared to receive the body and blood of Christ and received it, and our soul was replenished. Remembering that best day, let us partake in the spiritual communion by saying this prayer.
O Immaculate Queen of Heaven and Earth, Mother of God and Mediator of every grace, I believe that your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, is truly, really, and substantially contained in the most holy sacrament. I love him above all things and long to receive him in my heart, since now I cannot receive him sacramentally. Be so good to place him spiritually in my soul and never permit me to be separated from him. Amen.
Now we'll sing a communion hymn that's in Hindi.
जियो हे प्रभु विचार जियो हे
We'll say the prayer after communion of St. Thomas Aquinas together. I thank you, Lord,
Almighty Father, everlasting God, for having been pleased through no merit of mine, but of your great mercy alone, to feed me, a sinner, and your unworthy servant, with the precious body and blood of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that this Holy Communion may not be for my judgment and condemnation, but for my pardon and salvation. Let this Holy Communion be to me an armor of faith and a shield of goodwill, a cleansing of all vices and a rooting out of all evil desires. May it increase love and patience, humility and obedience, and all virtues. May it be a firm defense against the evil designs of all my visible and invisible enemies, a perfect quieting of all the desires of soul and body. May this Holy Communion bring about a perfect union with you, the
eternal priest, keep your priests within the shelter of your sacred heart, where none may touch them. Keep unstained their anointed hands, which daily touch your sacred body. Keep unsullied their lips, daily purpled with your precious blood. Keep pure and unearthly their hearts, sealed with the sublime mark of the priesthood. Let your holy love surround them and shield them from the world's temptation. Bless their labors with abundant fruit, and may the souls to whom they minister be their joy and consolation here and in heaven, their beautiful and everlasting crown. Amen.
Let us pray. Pour out upon us, O Lord, the Spirit of your love, and in your kindness make those you have nourished by this Paschal Sacrament one in mind and heart, through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Just before the final blessing, I'd like to thank all of those who've helped prepare these liturgies over the last few days and the last few weeks for enabling this to happen and making it available to you at home. I wish you a happy Easter as you celebrate it together with your families, or look at ways that you can be connected to those who are dear to you. And I just pray that you keep safe and take care of those you love. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Bow your heads and pray for God's blessing. May Almighty God bless you on this solemn feast of Easter, and may He protect you from all harm. Amen. Through the resurrection of His Son, God has granted us healing. May He fulfill His promises and bless you with eternal life.
Amen.
You have mourned for Christ's suffering. Now you celebrate the joy of His resurrection. May you come to the feast which lasts forever.
Amen.
And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Go in the peace and the joy of Christ to love and serve the Lord. Alleluia, alleluia.
Thanks be to God. Alleluia, alleluia.
We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord. We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord.
The spirit of Easter is all about hope, love, and joyful living. As Saint Paul today said in his letter to the Romans, that we have been baptized into Jesus Christ, and hence when Christ died, our old self also died, and when he resurrects, we shall also live with him. Let us surrender our old self, which we try to change throughout this Lenten season, so that as our Lord resurrects, may we too resurrect to be a new being. Let us offer ourselves and let us say this prayer in the name of Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil.
Mother Mary, continually pray for us and intercede for us. Lead us as we try to live a new life from now onwards. Help us so that this new life may be only focused towards eternity. Hail Mary,
Full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
the Memorare.
Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession, was left unaided. In spite of this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Virgin Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Jose Maria Escriva,
Pray for us.
Saint Paul,
Pray for us.
Saint John Paul II,
Pray for us.
Let's all make sign of the cross.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, friends, for joining us in this Easter Vigil. Wish you all a happy Easter and have a fruitful day ahead. We have begun the Divine Mercy Novena a day before, and we'll be ending it on 18th April, preparing ourselves for the Divine Mercy Sunday on 19th April. So do join us for the Divine Mercy Novena Chaplet every day at 3 p.m. live on our YouTube channel, A Square. Thank you.